Welcome everyone to the podcast. My guest today is super excited. It's Lotem Baram. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And just we've worked together in the past and just wanted to have him on to glean from his information, his knowledge on how to make students' lives better. So thank you, Lotem, for being here today.
Thanks,
Now,
Kwesi.
yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So Lotem is the instructional leader for student services and the school guidance counselor at Pickering College in Toronto since 2017. He's also an educational consultant for Best Fit Educational Consulting as well since 2013. So first question I just want to ask you is just how did you get into the education space and what drives your passion for being in the education space for students?
Oh wow. This might be a little bit of a longer, this is my origin story, I guess you would call it. So
Yeah,
I never
perfect.
wanted to be a teacher. Okay. Like I never, I know some people in high school, maybe their parents are educators and they're like, I'm going to be a teacher too, or principal or something like that. This was not ever on my radar. I went to university really having no idea what it is I wanted to do. I just kind of followed the pack. Oh, everyone going to university? Sure, I'll continue the pathway. And when I was there, I changed majors like four times. I graduated with like a comparative literature degree because that's where I landed. I liked reading, I liked writing, but at this point, education was not on the radar still. After university, I got a job working. Some of your viewers may remember a company called Kodak. They made those the cameras. I
Yep,
worked
yep,
in
yep.
their head office in Toronto. I was down at Black Creek and like sort of Eglinton area, um, and I was there working in like customer service. Then there was a position that opened up. Basically, at the time, a lot of these companies started outsourcing. So they started, sending a lot of Canadian jobs overseas where they can pay them cheaper rates. And so I had the opportunity of going to the Philippines to basically train, our Filipino counterparts on how to do the jobs of Canadians. Um, and so I went there. And so for about a month, I was in and around Manila in the Philippines, and this was my first chance at like teaching. Now, I wasn't teaching in the high school sort of sense, but I was teaching people how to use the systems and doing this. And I was like, this is actually really enjoyable to help people and do this. So it was a seed planted here. And I really didn't think much about it. I just knew that I enjoyed the experience and the opportunity. And then a friend of mine had gone to Japan and she was teaching English in Japan. And she said to
Mm.
me, you should come over. Like forget about like teaching. It's like it's a great experience. You get to check out a new culture, meet different people, you get paid, right? Like there's all these things. And I was like, okay, I can't wake up 20 years from now working at this desk because I wasn't passionate about the job, but I had to get a job. My parents were like, you can't, you can't just sit around with these student loans and do nothing. So I built the courage saved some money. About 6 months later, I moved to Japan, and that was my first real, um, opportunity to actually teach with younger learners. And so I taught students how to speak English for
Mm.
about a year and a half. From there, I was like, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Like, it didn't feel like work anymore. It felt really, really enjoyable. And I was like, I think that's what it should feel like. Um,
Wow.
and so I had another friend who went to Australia for teachers college. So I also got the travel bug, right? I
Mm.
was I was traveling, I was checking things. I was like, I don't think I'm ready to go home. And she's like, come to Australia, do teachers college there. It's really easy for Canadians to come back and teach with that like certification. And so I applied, I got in, I went to Australia for another year. I went to teachers college. And then I came back and actually started my formal, I don't know, educational career. So that's how I got into it. I wasn't a guidance counselor for the first little bit. For the first 5 or 6 years, I was an English teacher, just based on my undergraduate degree, which I loved. But then I got the opportunity to move into guidance and then it eventually took over my entire portfolio.
Okay, okay. Oh, well, you have quite the path and a different path to where you are than most. But I imagine that there's probably things from your past that can lend you that help students now, right? So you traveled, and there are some people that say, you know what, it's okay if you travel, figure things out. see the world, do that type of thing, as opposed to just following a regimented path. Now, as a guidance counselor, you obviously speak to students about what they should do with their life. Do you ever talk to them about the benefits of like traveling as opposed to necessarily settling down and going the traditional route of degree, then university, and go from there, as far as figuring out your way in life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't push a particular pathway for anyone, just sort of opening their mind to the idea that, as you said, it's not life is not linear,
Mm,
right? Like we don't there's no like point A and point B and then it's a straight line to get there. Like we kind of go like this on our way to maybe point B. And everyone's, I even even if you look at the school I'm at, you interview 20 different teachers. They're all teachers, but their paths are all very, very different. And so we talk about this idea of, a lot of times students think they need to have it all figured out before they get to college or university, right? Because maybe the people around them are like, I'm going to go study this, and then I'm going to become this, and then I'm going to have this job, and then right? Like they have this like
yeah.
plan in their head. I'll put it in air quotes because it's not a real plan. It's sort of this imagination, which is fine. But what they forget about is that those undergrad years are probably where they're going to figure it out. They don't need to have it all figured out before they get there. And they're going to get there through doing co-ops or traveling. A lot of people go travel in their third year, or joining clubs or fraternities or whatever it is that they're doing. But they're going to gather all of these experiences. And through that, they're going to shape their idea of what it is they're meant to do in this world. So they
Mhm.
put so much pressure on themselves to have it all figured out at such a young age. And, if we're making the mental health connection, I think that's part of this weight that they carry with them is to have super amount of clarity for something that even adults change careers at some point, right? And they don't necessarily have it. So it's about liberating them from that pressure, right? And
Mm.
travel is one way to do it. It's not for everybody, but it is I think it's an amazing way to meet different people and try different things and open your mind to how big this world is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a key thing that you said there is that you can figure out what to do in school by being out of school. So
Right.
you can figure it out, whether it's co-op, doing things outside of school to figure out what you really want to do. And you may not even figure it out until you start university or within university. So kind of what advice would you give then if someone's saying, okay, this is what I plan to do. Let me start with that. And kind of maybe be open to switching later on, knowing that there is a cost to that, right? If you do
Right.
switch going along, how do you kind of navigate that? You can figure it out as you go along, but you don't want to necessarily waste money doing one thing if you're going to be switching multiple times. And then also, I want to know what your thought is on the gap year.
Okay. So let's talk about the first question.
Yeah.
So, I think I'm a big basketball fan, and so a term that I use with students a lot of time is this ability to pivot, right? So for any of your followers that understand basketball, it's just like, sort of changing direction, right? Um, we need to build the capacity to understand that sometimes things don't go according to plan. Sometimes we do have to pivot, we do have to change direction, and that's okay. That's very, very normal in life. There are people around you, wherever you are, that can help you make that transition. But of course, the goal is to go into it and finish with it. Like you said, the intention is not to change. And so my approach to things is, the reason why the company is called Best Fit is about finding your best fit, not finding your program necessarily. Right. So,
Mhm.
what environment, what school is the one where you're going to be the most integrated into, the one that you're going to feel excited to go to class, the one that's going to feel like home, the one where you're going to go to the sports games and cheer for for your team, where 20 years from now you're going to be wearing their sweatshirt telling maybe your kids you need to go to this school because it's amazing.
Mhm.
That's what fit is all about because most schools have similar programs,
Yeah.
right? But the experience is very different. So if you find a school that's your best fit. And you can pivot in terms of program. It's a much more difficult thing to pivot from schools. That's a much more difficult transition. So I would say work on the fit. So usually I start with students, we don't even talk about programs. We talk about everything besides academics that makes them tick and makes them happy. If they're happy first, typically they'll be successful second. Um, so that's my feeling on that. In terms of the gap year, I think gap years are fine. I think gap years are really important for a lot of people, but they need to have purpose also,
Mhm.
right? So when you're planning for anything, if you're thinking of a gap year of like, okay, I'm not ready to go to university or college, right? I'm going to take a gap year. Just it's like vague idea of what it is that you're going to do. That's okay, but should be defined, right? So sometimes students want to upgrade their grades. Maybe they're not where they need to be, and so I'm going to spend the year upgrading the grade. That's a purpose. That's a very specific purpose. Sometimes they want to go and travel and experience different things and figure out what they want to do through that experience. That's a plan. But to like just take a year off for the sake of taking a year off, I think the challenge with that is that it's really hard to get back into it. So when I'm working with families, speaking with parents, their biggest concern about gap years is usually will they go back to school, right? Will they, now that they've been out of it for a year, will they be, motivated to be able to go back to school, or will they lose that sort of educational drive? And that's a real concern. So I think gap years are great if they're purposeful. If
Mhm.
they're not, it could, there are risks. There are risks involved.
Yeah, you do hear those students that just they take a gap year and all of a sudden they forget about going back to school, right? I've had friends in the past that it took a gap year and then they went straight to work because they didn't realize, like you said, the purpose of actually having the year to figure something out, to give you more direction. They end up more lost than anything. So I think that's key to having purpose. Um, Tell me about like the thought behind starting Best Fit Consulting, because most people in the education space don't necessarily start something else to help students, to help families. What made you start that, and what drives you to keep that going, even though you have a role within a school as well?
Okay, so it's a pretty simple story, but I've been working in the independent school system for the last 13, 14 years, something like that. And the families that send their children here, they pay a lot of money, obviously, and they get a lot of support. They get a lot of support in the way of post-secondary counseling. Students apply all over the world. They have the access to, I think, some pretty exceptional counselors, college counselors, university counselors that know the system really, really well. And so I started hearing some stories about friends or acquaintances that had children in the public education system, that where you have maybe a ratio of like 500 students to one guidance counselor, and they're really struggling to get even a baseline level of support with their post-secondary applications. And so the idea started as kind of this like as almost like a tutoring model, right? Like, okay, I'm struggling in English. I can't go to my teacher, right, to get tutoring. I'm going to hire an external tutor to help me with the English.
And
And
they
so
can't go to the teacher because they have so many to help and they don't have the time.
absolutely,
Okay.
right? They're not going to meet with you at 6, 7 o'clock at night to help you with your essay. If you go to extra help sessions, there might be a lineup of 20 people. So it's like speed dating. You have 30 seconds, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is the unfortunate reality of the education space is that there is not enough educators for students. And so that's kind of the birth of the idea. So it started with someone referring someone to me and being like, look, you offer this level of support to your day students. Of course, they pay tuition. Um, for a fraction of that cost, maybe you can offer that service to students that otherwise wouldn't have that support. I'm not the only one in this space. There are many, many other people. I see ads for companies that do this. I'd say the difference is that I'm working in the education system. I'm not like a graduate student that has applied to a school, got in, and now is giving you tips on how they did their application. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have the knowledge and you're
Yeah.
in the day to day, so you have the most you have more information and more access to information that um, someone that just gets into the space wouldn't necessarily have, right?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I know everything. I think there's
Oh,
institutional knowledge that's there for sure. I think it's the best the sort of the practice, the counseling models that are used, right? So a lot of like the one thing that I don't do is I don't write essays for students,
hmm.
right? Like as an example, there's a lot of consultants out there that will kind of do that. They'll do the work for the students. And I don't. believe in that, right? I believe in helping the students, guiding them, giving them feedback along the way, educating them about the process, but not doing it for them. And I would say that that might be a difference between myself and other people that offer the same type of services. And some families might want that, right? But they're not going to get it from me. So,
Okay,
it's
okay.
not the right place if that's what you want.
Okay. And so you offer help on that end, like educational help, tutoring, that type of thing. But do you also offer guidance? Like if a family comes to you and says, My child is 17 years old, doesn't know what they want to do with their life," is that part of your consulting packages that you offer as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, um, certainly I would say post-secondary planning and applications and all that stuff to the US, the UK, Canada, I would say that makes up probably 60 to 70% of the clients that come in. But then the other ones are more career planning, more trying to figure out what they want to do with this life, where they want to go. They're completely lost. And there's a bunch of different ways we do that. But yeah, that's another service I offer them.
Yeah. And I noticed that you started this in 2013. Um, what's changed? Because there's probably a lot has changed in the last 12 years as far as um, with the internet and people thinking they can, start a business. They see someone online and they're going to get rich, but they don't. If that doesn't work out for them, what should I do in school? It feels to me that there's more confusion than ever about what am I going to do with my life than there was even 5 years ago. Is that what you're seeing? Tell me what you're seeing now.
Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't, and I actually don't think that this idea of confusion, I think a lot of people think they know what they want to do. I mean, I think down the road they
Okay.
probably change their mind. So I think that hasn't changed. I think the competitive landscape of admissions has changed. I think the pressure, there's been steady grade inflation in I live in Ontario, right? So in the province of Ontario, the grades that these kids need to get, even just to be considered for programs, is astronomical.
So
And so
grade inflation means, just explain that to me.
okay, so basically the grades that they would need to get in high school in order to get admission into certain programs,
Okay.
it's gone up. When I was in school, and I sound like my parents now, like when I was your age, but I suppose that's the stage of life we're at. You had an 80% average, you could pretty much go to any university you wanted for any program, right? That was considered. Now I have students coming to me crying with 90s, right?
Wow.
Because they're being fed this idea that they need these exceptional grades, and then they're still being marked out of 100. So there's only so much you can inflate these grades. The other thing that's changed is that the Canadian system has started moving towards more of a holistic model. Okay, so well, that's what I mean by that is that they're looking for stuff in addition to grades. They're looking for students to demonstrate leadership, experience in extracurriculars. They're looking for them to write essays, to do video interviews, not unlike what we're doing here, in addition to the grades that they're getting. And I think a lot of students are not prepared for that. And so there's a lot of demand from me to help them prepare their what they call supplemental applications, which is those essays, those interviews, and stuff like that. And that's changed, and that's picking up greatly over the last couple of years.
And what's the purpose beside that? Just so that they're not just focused on numbers, but they have soft skills too? What is the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I think what's happened is that the universities have realized that grades only tell so much,
Okay.
right? And now that everyone is getting 90s, it's becoming even more difficult for them to distinguish applicants from one another. So I'll give you an example. Let's pretend that you're an admission rep, and I'm going to present you with two applicants. You tell me which one you're going to admit.
Okay.
And so you have applicant A has a 92 overall average, 92%. And applicant B has a 96. Who would you accept?
If that's the only information I have,
Yeah.
then 96.
Right. It's pretty obvious, right? But I'm
Yeah.
going to give you more information now, and then you tell me if it's as easy of a decision. So applicant A has the 92, but really has nothing else. That's what they do. Or sorry, has the 90. Applicant A is the 92, but they also work a part-time job. They're captain of the basketball team. They take care of their little brother because their parents work late, right? You add those things. Applicant B has 96, but really just sits in the room and studies all day.
Hmm.
Now, what would your decision be?
Yeah, yeah. I can see it being harder because it shows the 92 has more flexibility. They show that they can handle more things, and they're not going to be overstressed when something else comes into their life that is not just studying in their room. So, yeah, I'm probably going to take the 92% now.
Right, it changes it, right? So this is what universities, particularly I say universities because that's usually who's using it more than colleges. Um, that's what they're trying to figure out.
Yeah.
Is is that number actually reflective of their ability to handle all of the things that come with like collegiate environment, which is not just grades. It's about time management. It's about building social, like being able to speak to people, making connections, all those extra things that make you flourish. It's not just about studying.
So how does a student then prepare for that? If you're talking to a student in high school that is getting that 95%, but wants to make sure they tick all these other boxes that a university is going to accept, how do they do that, but also not go crazy and still be mentally healthy along the way?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge, right? So like for a while there, it felt like people were just resume hunting, right? They were just doing things to say that they did it and that they can market themselves. But now they're starting to understand, and the stuff that I coach them on is the idea of like meaningful and lasting, right? So it's more quality over quantity. So find those volunteer experiences that speak to your passions, right? Like, for example, if you've had a parent that, has had to deal with cancer, for example, and you want to go and volunteer at the local hospital because this is close to your heart, there's a story you can tell about that. It's
Mm,
not about just going somewhere and plucking 1 hour of volunteer experience here and then here and then here and then here. Create a thread, but connect it to what you're passionate about. If you can do that, number one, it won't feel like extra work. It'll feel very meaningful to you, which is much more mentally healthy than just like filling your schedule with hours and hours of random things.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and number two, it's authentic.
yeah. I can so see that. Like if I have those two students again, say they got the exact same grades. Student A did 50 hours of volunteer work, but it was all scattered. Student B did 30 hours of volunteer work, but it was tied to the fact that they were hungry growing up, so they volunteered at a food bank, or they had a parent that dealt with Alzheimer's, so they volunteered in a hospital with Alzheimer patients, right? So would that be an example of kind of tying in your volunteer experience to something meaningful?
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
nailed it, right? You know, there's a story that you're telling and only you can tell it. Right? So, and this is what I speak to them about all the time. If someone else could write your essay and just replace your name, then you're not probably doing it the right way,
Mm, mm.
right? You need to be able to tell your own authentic story that is meaningful to you and is unapologetic, right?
Okay.
So rather than trying to write what you think an admission rep will want to hear,
Yeah.
because they can
Yeah.
they can they can like fish that out pretty easily.
Yeah, I guess so. And it just sounds like it creates a more well-rounded student that is going to apply to post-secondary, and we're not just robotically sending people into that space. Is there like besides, you do this for families as part of a business, but are schools doing anything to prepare students for this, like, I guess, multi-layered approach they need to take when it goes to applying to universities? Are schools doing any of this?
So I don't know. I can't speak for other schools.
Yeah.
I know that we do it here at Pickering College. We have something called a Global Leadership Diploma, where students are connecting their passions and areas in this world that they want to fix, and then they're coming up with their own research project and action plan. So by the time that they graduate, they've put something in place to address an issue, and they can talk about this on their college applications. Um, I don't know what other schools are doing. I actually think that's probably where there's a need is
Mhm.
to, that holistic approach to education is, like stop just thinking about grades. Just think about all these different areas that you can develop as a person. The biggest need I find when I'm helping students prepare, and this is even students at my own school, is for video interviews. Like you asked about technology and how has that changed things. I don't, they really struggle learning how to speak to people, right?
Mhm.
I think they're very used to communicating via online
Or like this
notes.
down
Right?
on
Yeah,
their phone, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the minute that they have to have like a real conversations, I'm not suggesting that they can't do it, but I think that their capacity to do it and their practice has been limited over the last little while. Certainly during COVID, I think COVID made everyone step back a little bit. Like we
Yeah.
just live in this online space. Um, so I think that's an area that they can practice.
Yeah.
We do interview practice here at school. I had a student here this morning that's preparing for a university application, and I'm testing them. I'm firing off questions. I'm timing them based on the thing. I'm giving them feedback. We can do that here because we're blessed of having a low ratio of, guidance counselor to student, but I'm not sure they're capable of doing that in the public systems, which is really sad.
Yeah, the numbers are a lot different in the public systems. I mean, you're not the Minister of Education or you have access to funds, but if budget was no constraint and you could just wave a wand and say this is where funds would be best used, let's go to the public system. What would be the first area that funds should go to and this is obviously you have no control over it, but if you did, where would it go?
I think it's always human resources. I think at the end of the day, smaller class sizes means that the average teacher can connect with the students at a higher rate, right? So for students that need remediation, they can offer that. For students that need like expansion, like extended work, they can offer that, right? They can really differentiate is a very academic term we used. They can differentiate all of the programmings that they offer. Um, yeah, I think in my area in student services, the lights just went off, by the way, because I
I
think
saw that. I saw that.
power
So
outage. Sorry about
yeah, I
that
can
for
still
your
see you.
viewers. Cut that one
Okay.
out. The I think I think mental health support is really, really important. I think student services is really, really important. And those are areas that are historically low.
Yeah.
They are, what we do a lot of times is we create a plan, right? It's a paper plan. We create an individual education plan, right? You hear of these terms, these
I agree.
IEPs, and then you have a resource teacher that reviews them and then maybe sends it out to all the teachers and says, okay, Kwesi needs extra time to write their tests and they need a computer, right? We list these accommodations, but I'm not sure there's a lot of learning strategists that work with these students to help them understand the way that they learn and
Hmm.
how they could become stronger, right? Like, how can they become stronger? What we're doing is we're just giving them accommodations. And so that's supposed to fix the problem. It's kind of like dealing with a symptom, not dealing with the root issue or
Yeah,
root cause of the problem.
I
So I
hear
think
you.
human resources, I hate to say it,
Yeah, no,
but
it always comes back to that, right?
yeah.
How do you measure then success when it comes to, things you've done for the students, and then they go out and they try to implement some of the things that they've worked with you on. And so you can answer that from being in the school, being in the independent school system, and also in your own business. How do you measure success um, with your students?
Yeah, in the independent school system, I would imagine a lot of people would measure what we do based on what programs and schools the students are getting into, right? Have you gone into Harvard this year or whatever it is, right? And that's for whatever reason, that's a metric of success. I don't look at that as an achievement. It is. It's obviously a great thing, but I don't think that in and of itself is what I would measure success. I I measure it based on student happiness. And I know that there's no like barometer here. There's no like test to show that. So it's very anecdotal. It's very much based on the conversations that I have with students. But, when a student is faced with a challenge, okay, I had two students coming in today, for example, that received a score on their, chemistry test that was much lower than what they would imagine. And that sucks, right? It's grade 12. And now the initial feeling is my world's crashing down. I'm not going to get the average I need to get. And they start like spiraling into this like worst case doomed future. And the way that they're able to rebound from that, the speed at which they're able to rebound and change their thoughts and then their feelings and then their behaviors, right? We talk about that sort of cycle a lot, is much quicker than they would have done in grade 9, grade 10, or grade 11. And to me, that's a huge measure of success because challenges are going to happen. It's how you respond to them is probably more important than trying to avoid them your entire life.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's a lot, there's a lot. I like that thoughts, feelings, behaviors. I like that cycle that you mentioned. On that same note, what advice would you give to students maybe do grade nines and then also grade 12s as they're finishing high school, um, when it comes to building their mental health. So as they're starting the high school experience, and as they're about to start the university experience, what are the pieces of advice, if anything, maybe one piece of advice for students in at both ends?
Yeah, so they're starting different phases, but similarly starting it. Yeah, I think that it takes work, right? Like I think that's what people don't realize is like you wanna, I don't know, you want to become really, really great in math class. You want to master calculus. You got to do a whole bunch of practice questions, right? You can't expect your resiliency to just come, right? You got to practice certain things. Like I think about, I have two children. I have a 9-year-old son, and I have an 11-year-old daughter. And my daughter is the thing, my son is a goldfish. He just forgets things 10 seconds later. But my daughter's the overthinker, right? She's
Mm,
the overfeeler. She's the kid that has struggled with anxiety, and overthinking and stuff like that. And she had, hope maybe some of your listeners will identify with this, for 2 years, she had sleep anxiety, from like 6 to 8. She was, I don't even know how she survived because it felt like she just never slept and was up all the time. And it was just so heartbreaking to watch that. And, here I am, right? Professional in the mental health, social emotional space. My wife is a vice principal at an elementary school. So we're two educators here and we can't help our kid,
mm,
right? There's nothing, all the strategies that I work with my own students, none of it is working. And it was a really, really humbling experience. And we would go through, this is a really long answer. I'm sorry for that. But
okay.
we would go through, do your breathing techniques and, positive affirmations. We went through like this like checklist of all these different strategies. And what I realized down the road is that we were practicing them at the wrong time, right? We were practicing these skills when she was feeling heightened anxiety. And actually, what we need to do is we need to practice these things when she was feeling totally okay, because in that moment, she couldn't actually use the strategies. And so
Yeah.
this is kind of the answer I think I would give to both people is you're going to have challenges. You can't wait until you're going through it to practice how to deal with them. You got to already practice beforehand. It's kind of like saying, I'm going to practice my jump shot in the middle of a game. No, you need to practice it during practice when you're not under that stress of the
Yeah.
game,
Yeah.
and then you could use it effectively then. So I think that's what, in my mind, that's what, any mental health strategy that you use, you need to don't neglect it when things are going well. Like really focus on it, whether you're, journaling or whatever it is that you're doing, do it so that you're ready to handle it when the game comes.
So it sounds like it's like a daily routine you want them to develop so that they can come back to it, and it's like working the muscle so that when they get to the point when they need it, they can exercise it. So what do you do then for your own mental health? What are your personal practices to keep your mental health strong?
Uh, I like to write. I'm a writer, right? I like to get the thoughts out of my head and into this world. And I have a little journal. And, I did it even, I actually just opened up my travel journal when I was backpacking, for like 6 months. I had this like little notebook, writing in. I tend to write myself into, and sounds weird, but into like narrative stories. So I'll write like sort of short stories and there'll be a character and it's usually the thoughts and the feelings that the character is going through is probably what I'm going through, and it's very therapeutic for me to kind of get it out. We went through a session. Have you ever read the book The Happiness Advantage? I don't know if you've read that one.
No, who is that? I always love recommending new.
So it's a guy named Sean Aker, I think is how you pronounce his name. I'll flip you an email with the information afterwards. But he basically wrote this book that's saying that, our idea of success is wrong. He interviewed all these like top CEOs and athletes, celebrities, people who are very accomplished in their area to find out what's the common thread between them and being success. And he found out that they were um, happy first and then success came, right? And that our traditional like idea of success is I'm going to get into my first choice university program and then I'm going to be happy, or I'm going to get this job and then I'm going to be happy, or I'm going to get this promotion then I'm going to be happy. But what we do is once we get the promotion, we want to get the next promotion. So we're moving the benchmark for happiness. We get into our first choice university program. Now I want to get into grad school, right? And we're constantly moving this benchmark of happiness and we never get there, right? So he said we need to rewire our brains. We need to actually figure out what makes us happy first, and then success will follow. And so one of the things that he recommends is he says you can rewire your brain if you do certain activities for 21 days straight. That's his thing. And they're not
Okay.
that easy to do, the activities. But one of the ones he did was write down three things that you're grateful for every day. And you
Okay.
can rewire your brain to look at this world not about all the things that you don't have, but start thinking about all of the things that you do have, raise your happiness, become more successful. So I did that with my wife. My
Yeah.
wife and I
Yeah.
did it for about a year together every day. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard. It's hard to not repeat yourself. Like, yeah, I'm grateful for my kids and my family, right? Like, and then now
Yeah. Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
You have to really dive deep. You have to get beyond,
I
um,
know, because you can just get repetitive and just kind of tick a box and say, grateful for my family, grateful for a sunny day, and that's it, right? But to actually pick things that are unique to maybe the last 24 hours or whatnot, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's one thing that I try to do. I'll be honest, I'm not as regular with it anymore. I don't do it every day, but probably once a week. And I might not write them down, but I'll take a moment of like 5 minutes, sit down, think about it, and like usually a smile comes on my face,
Yeah.
like just with those thoughts. So it's
Was there
important.
one of the ways he suggested it? Just curious, because I know a lot of people have said write down what you're grateful for. Was there something in the book that you saw that you hadn't seen before that you were like, oh, that's something that I haven't tried before, haven't thought of before that he suggests to do to build that happiness first?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I don't remember them exactly, but I think one of them was about thinking about something that happened positive that day that made you feel good. Okay,
Okay.
like maybe someone held the door open for you. Maybe if you're like a high school student, maybe someone in the class spoke to you that's never spoken to you before and it kind of made you feel good, whatever it is. And then
Okay.
to sort of write down everything in stream of consciousness, what happened that day in
Okay.
that moment. So I went,
Actually, that forces you to be even more present than write down what you're grateful for because it has to be something that happened that day. It's
right.
almost like a win for the day.
Yeah. And his idea is like if you write it down like that, it it I don't know, it like goes into your long-term memory, something like that. And then it actually does affect your happiness levels. Of course, there's other things like physical activity, which I think is really good. I think a lot of students, adults neglect that part, right? We're so used to being online and we're not getting outdoors as much. That raises your endorphins and makes you happier. Um, and then the other one is what he called have you ever heard the term random acts of kindness? I think we've heard these things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He said, forget about that. Okay. Do intentional acts of kindness. So
Uh,
choose, I'm going to do one nice thing for someone every day. And again, it could be as simple as like holding a door open for someone. But doing that can really affect your approach to life.
it's almost just planning what you're going to do to be kind as opposed to just if it shows up being intentional with it.
Correct.
Okay. So one more question I want to ask is, what are students saying to you when it comes to their own mental health? What are you seeing now as being one of the biggest things that they struggle with? And then what do you tell them when it comes to dealing with that?
Oh my God, it's so varied. It's so
Yeah.
hard to have like the right
Or just,
answer. I think the levels of sort of, and I'm not saying it from a clinical sense, but the levels of anxiety and, students self-identifying as being depressed are really, really high. And I think that the students that are the healthiest mentally are the ones that are not online the most. That's just my own, I don't have hard data on this. But I feel like the students that live in their devices, whether they're on Snapchat or Instagram, whatever it is, I think it really affects their mental health because there's a lot of things on there, forget about individual like interactions with other people, but you watching ads with people who are maybe fit and maybe start having body issues, right? Like there's all of these different things that are happening on there that are really not the real world. And so they believe that what they're seeing is real, but it's not. And they can't get out of it. So like even my daughter right now is like petitioning my wife and I to allow her to go on Snapchat. Okay, she's 11, okay? But her argument is all of my friends are on Snapchat. That's how we communicate. And so I'm asking my students every day, I'm like, should I let her go on? Like, I don't think so. And they're like, no, we wish
yeah.
our parents were more strict. It's interesting, right? Because they
Yeah.
they
Some
all
people
will
say
ask.
high school, they shouldn't even be on social media till high school. And then I think Jonathan Haidt says like 15, 16 at the earliest.
Right, give them a flip phone, right? Is what he
Yeah,
says. Like, do
yeah,
they want a
yeah.
phone? Give them a flip phone. Um, and so I try to remind myself of that, but I feel like that's a little thing. That's not even something that they need to change in terms of their, thoughts and feelings. It's like get off of that device. And I think maybe not instantly, but I think they will see an improvement in their mental health when they're living in the real world versus in this digital space.
So what do you say to this student? I know it's hard to answer, but my whole life is on there. If I don't go on there, I'm gonna miss out on what so and so is doing. And what does that look like? Does that look like maybe 30 minutes a day? Track your cell phone usage and reduce it by a certain amount of time? Like, what's a practical step that I can take to do that on a daily basis?
Yeah, so I think screen limits. I think setting sort of limits. They do this, you do this on certain apps. If you're like gambling or something, you can set like daily spend limits to,
Yeah,
manage your vice or your, addiction or whatever it is. Why don't we do that with phones? So I do that for my kids already, right? Like we have parental controls, but when they're teenagers, it's a lot more difficult because they have to
yeah,
self-manage. So what the work that I do with them is I'll say this to them, they'll roll their eyes at me. And I'll say just let's take a look at your screen usage for the last week. On your device, it actually shows you. And on average, they're high. They're like 10 hours a day or something.
wow.
Like it's
And
it's really high. And considering the idea that they're in school all day and they're
yeah,
not around
exactly. How do
you,
you even
it's
manage 10
even
hours a day? Yeah,
like where are you getting these hours,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And what are you doing with those hours, right? So we also break it down because it says like they'll say like social, productivity, like it'll actually break it down. So I think you need to use the analytics from the phone and you start with realistic challenges. So if your average is 10 hours, what's a reasonable goal? I'm like, okay, let's get down to eight.
yeah.
8 hours a day. In my mind, like that's
Yeah, that's
crazy.
a
Like,
full
that
work
is
day.
not.
Full work day on social media is
Yeah.
not the worst thing that you can drop down
Right?
to.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So, you know, something's happening on my phone. Okay. So that's, and then we kind of scale it back.
yeah.
Oh,
Awesome. Awesome.
I
Did
kind
I
of
lose
lost your
my,
video here.
did I lose my video? There we go.
Okay, perfect.
Lost my video.
And you're working towards a larger goal, right? Like just to finish that is it's an ongoing process of self-improvement.
Yeah,
And it's not an instant fix. And that's another thing that they're not used to is this like immediate gratification. Um, so I think that it all falls under the same theme of like working on yourself, um, doing these exercises to become happier, healthier, more engaged in this world. And when they see the results, it
yeah,
motivates them more. It's kind of like going to the gym, right? Like in the first little bit, you might not see
yeah. You don't
results. And
like
you're like,
it?
what am I doing here? But once you start seeing a little bit of results, it's going to keep you getting back. So you can't give up during that first phase.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just coming back to simple habits. So yeah. Well, Lotem, I want to thank you for your time. I learned so much from you, and want to thank you for not only what you do in the independent school system, but what you do privately as well for students for their success. How can people find you, connect with you, find out more about what you offer, as well as connect with you for your services?
Yeah, so I mean, if you wanna check out, I have a website for Best Fit Educational Consulting. It's that um, URL was taken, so it's guidingyourfuture.com. That's basically what it is.
Mm.
www.guidingyourfuture.com. All of my contact information is there, so they can drop me a line or just check out the website. But happy to answer any questions they have.
Yeah. And you're on social media as well. You're on LinkedIn as well.
I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well. It's just my name, Lotem Baram. You can find me, connect with me. I'll accept your connection request. So, yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. So appreciative.